Not to take away time from our keynote speaker for today, I'd like to welcome us all to hear Ruchika Chittrabhanu. Ruchika is born and raised in a Jain family, and she's had a deep interest in the philosophy of Jainism. Ruchika pursued her master's in philosophy, majoring in Jainism, and she's also been inspired by Gurudev Chittrabhanu and Pramodaben Chittrabhanu. Ruchika has been a vegan for over 17 years, and she raises awareness about animal compassion and the benefits of following a vegan lifestyle through events and festivals in India. She is a co-founder of Ahimsa Fest, India's largest vegan festival, the Earth in One, an events platform to help people transition to a vegan lifestyle, and a board member of the Jain Vegan Initiative. And she actually and I worked together on a webinar about the meaning of Diwali in Jainism, and it was really a wonderful collaboration. Ruchika is a wonderful partner. She has really great insight into what's going on in India, and I am so looking forward to hearing you speak. Ruchika, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Gina, and Jai Jinendra, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris, Arianta Institute, and Hope for giving me this opportunity. There are such wonderful speakers here, and it's so overwhelming to hear them. It's such an honor to be here. So my topic is facets of veganism in Jainism. And before I start speaking on that, I want to first touch base on the foundation and the fundamental principle of Jainism, that is Ahimsa, which is the cornerstone of every ethics and doctrine in Jainism. And without Ahimsa, no virtues and no principles would be of any significance. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word which means non-violence, non-injury, and absence of desire to harm any life forms. So it's basically following Ahimsa through our thoughts, speech, and action. And I'd like to talk a little bit about causing harm to any life forms. But before that, we need to understand the relation between Ahimsa and existence. So in this universe, we see two elements. One is living, which is jiva, and the other is non-living, ajiva. Living is what we call as soul or atma, consciousness, sentient beings, divinity, and non-living is matter. Matter is made up of atoms which integrate and disintegrate. So everything that we see around us with our eyes is made up of matter, including our own bodies. So excluding the liberated soul, all worldly beings reside in a body. And according to Jainism, this universe is filled with living beings. And these living beings can be found in 6 forms of bodies, classified according to the senses they possess, such as touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. And these 6 forms of bodies are earth, water, fire, air, and plant kingdom. All these are one-sense beings, and they are immobile. And according to Jainism, earth, water, fire, and air are life themselves. Apart from supporting other forms of life, they themselves are life. And the 6th form of body is mobile beings. And mobile beings are further divided into 2 sense beings. And we know 2 sense beings have the sense of touch and taste. 3 sense beings have an additional sense of smell. 4 sense beings have touch, taste, smell, and sight. And then there's 5 sense beings who have all the 5 senses. And the 5 sense beings include animals, birds, humans, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, all of these. So as we see that life evolves from this 1 sense being to 5 sense being. So as common sense would say that the 5 sense being is the most evolved soul, if one has to see from that point of view. But according to Jainism again, irrespective of the size, shape, the different physical or spiritual developments, all life form has to be viewed as equal. and therefore no life has the right to harm or injure or kill another life. All life forms have the right to live peacefully, without fear, and harmoniously. And this then makes us question, right? I mean, how does one quantify ahimsa? Because ahimsa is so abstract, it is so large. And in one of the scriptures, which is Agams, ahimsa is, kind of given a little framework. And it says that there is nothing smaller than an atom in this universe and nothing larger than space. So there is no virtue that can be more subtle or bigger than ahimsa. But someone who's starting out on this path of ahimsa, it can be extremely daunting because they wouldn't know where to start. Because if Jainism is saying that all living beings, in spite of their size and shape, are to be seen equally, and at the same time, our life depends on these one-sense beings, because how do we survive without water or without air and without earth or without plants? So Jainism clarifies this and says that there is something called necessary violence or arthadanda, where it is practically impossible to survive without causing some harm to the smallest living beings. As I said, because we need to drink water, we need to breathe, we need to eat food, we need earth to use. And therefore, it tells us that in order to survive, we have to make sure that we reduce our killing to the lowest form of life. And therefore, any killing towards the mobile beings, which are 2 to 5 sense beings, is absolutely unnecessary. That doesn't define our survival. That is only coming out of our desires and our pleasures, which is driven by greed. And greed then plays home to other negative passions, such as ego, anger, and deceit. So Jainism further clarifies and it simplifies this violence and tells us that there's 2 forms of violence. There's gross violence, which is causing harm or injury to another living being through our speech and action. And the subtle violence is causing harm through our thoughts and emotions. So violence is not always to be interpreted through killing, but also through these negative emotions. And as I said, that greed later plays home to other negative passions such as ego, anger, and deceit. And Jainism lays a lot of stress on gross ahimsa and how we should abstain from gross ahimsa. So like we saw that 2 to 5 sense beings are more evolved than 1 sense beings. So one thing we have to do is definitely move away from causing violence to the 2 to 5 sense beings. And as 5 sense beings, as humans ourselves, we can probably create a connection with another 5 sense being, like let's say a pet, because we can relate to their pain and pleasure. And when we create this connection with another living being, we are fostering a feeling of love and universal friendship towards them. So Jainism is indirectly guiding us by abstaining from gross violence towards abstaining from subtle violence as well. Because this fostering of universal friendship will eventually make us more mindful. It will make us less indulgent and take us towards a step of self-restraint. And self-restraint, which is Sayyam in Jainism, is the first step towards ahimsa. So in an act of violence, we start from a thought that I want to consume, let's say, something of dairy or meat. So it starts with a thought. But to stop violence, we have to stop from the action. So we have to stop from gross ahimsa and then go towards subtle ahimsa. And in today's time, where gross violence has permeated into our lives in so many different ways that in spite of being vegetarians, we may not be realizing that we are still consuming animal products in some form. And therefore, we can equate animal agriculture to gross violence today. And I came across this little chart and I thought this was quite, it was quite elaborate because we generally relate violence to killing and to meat and to eggs. So as vegetarian, we feel we are not part of that. But we forget that an industry uses every part of that animal. So what is not being used in the animal industry might be used in another industry as a byproduct or as a derivative to improve the quality of that product. Or their skin could be used for something else, or they could be used in certain medicines. So it is becoming so difficult to actually stay away from these animal products. And what can we do so that we are not part of this gross violence? And if we have to reflect on our life, there are so many ways we are supporting this kind of gross violence, either through leather, where they're using domesticated animals as well as wild animals, or through wool, which, where we can, where the sheep is reared brutally and eventually it goes to the slaughterhouse. The hens are used for chicken as well as eggs. In many countries, eggs are seen as vegetarian products. And in India now, there's huge marketing happening to say that eggs are vegetarian because they are unfertilized. There'll never be a chick coming out of it. So there's a huge marketing going on recently about this. There's oyster farming, fish farming, insect farming, bees harvesting. All these are kind of animal agriculture. And somewhere or the other, we are all a part of it. And of course, the worst is the dairy industry. So as vegetarian, if you're consuming dairy, we are supporting this cruelty, we are supporting this industry, and we are indirectly supporting the meat industry because the meat industry gets its raw products from the dairy industry, at least in India. And now I want to talk about the facets of veganism and Jainism. And the first thing that Jainism says for a Jain is to stay away from certain foods called vigais. Vigais are foods which create negative passions in us. And it obstructs the path of a aspirant or someone who's on the path of spiritual seeking. And there are two categories in this. The larger category is called Mahavigai, which includes meat, butter, honey, and alcohol. In meat and honey, we can see direct violence happening. But in case of butter and alcohol, the reason why they're put in this category is because in that process of making butter and honey, there are millions of microorganisms that are caused which die in this entire process. And that's why, as we said, unearth dund or the unnecessary violence. And because our survival doesn't depend on this, these are the four categories, these are the four kinds of foods which should be avoided at all times. And the other category, the lesser category or the lower category known as Lagu Vigai, includes milk, yogurt, ghee, which is clarified butter, oil, jaggery, and derivatives of jaggery like sugar, and fried foods. These again obstruct the path of a spiritual seeker. And medicine today also talks about the health hazards and the environmental hazards, as we just heard Tushar and Gina and Asha speak about this. So the first aspect that Jainism is in lines with veganism is where it is saying that avoid the vigais or the negative passion creating foods. I want to now draw a parallel between animal agriculture and the violation of the 5 principles of Jainism. And in this case, I'm going to consider dairy, but this would be true for any of the animal agriculture industry or exploitation of any living being, whether it's on large scale or even small scale. So it would also hold true for small dairy farmers in India, because all across the practices are cruel. So the first law of Ahimsa or non-violence, like we saw that in order to survive, there has to be certain violence caused to one sense being, without which we cannot survive. But violence caused to 2 to 5 sense being is absolutely unnecessary. And when it comes to violence, as vegetarians, we are constantly relating that to just meat or egg industry. And often as Jains and vegetarians, and this is what I used to feel, that I'm a vegetarian. I mean, what more can I do? I'm already practicing Ahimsa. There's nothing more I can do. And this was because we are so used to seeing the final product, right? In case of meat, we see there's blood. We see there's end of life. We see the animal dying. We see suffering. But in case of dairy, we don't see the violence, because the animal is not dying instantly. There is no blood. The next day, the animal is giving milk again. And we are conditioned to see the final product and not see the process that's happening before. But like how Jainism says that, like the smallest atom, Jainism defines Ahimsa to the subtlest form. And it says that the animal is domesticated. And if it is tied, its freedom is curbed. It's not given food or water on time. If there's breeding, if there's inflicting pain, if there's fear created in an animal, all these are forms of violence. And in animal agriculture, all these are prevalent. And therefore, we violate the first law of Jainism, that is of non-violence. And not to forget, eventually these animals go for slaughter. So Jainism further elaborates that executing violence directly or through someone else, or even appreciating an act done by someone else, they all bear the same result. The next one, just a moment. So I came across, I mean, if you look at the slide, you can tell it's from a children's website. And it's strange, I came across this, this image, and I found it amusing because the title says, "What do different animals give us?" And this is probably for children in kindergarten or primary school, as you can tell from the colors. And it shows that the chicken gives you meat and it gives you eggs, and the cow gives us milk, etc., or cheese. And I realized that we start the childhood, we start that education with a lie, because the animals don't give us anything. I often hear people say that cows give us milk. And I have met adults who actually think that cows lactate all their lives. I don't know if you met people like that, but I meet people like this every now and then. And when I question them, do you know when the cow gives milk? And they say, but the cow gives milk all its life. It lactates all its life. And that's the ignorance we live with. And there's nothing we are doing to remove that ignorance either, because of our inertia. And when someone, in spite of knowing the truth, we don't want to give it up, because our attachment to our senses is so strong that we believe, or we are conditioned to believe, that we will succumb to illnesses or deficiencies if we stop consuming dairy products. And dairy products is the source of good health. The other misconception in India is that if we don't extract the milk from the mother cow or buffalo or even goat, then the mother suffers. Or if the calf is allowed to drink all the milk, it will have digestive issues. And therefore, human intervention is important for the well-being of these animals. This itself is a lie. And we do nothing. We just continue living with that lie. And in spite of sometimes, many times now that veganism has become so popular and the truth is coming out, in spite of knowing the truth, we still continue to live in that lie, which is out of inertia. And inertia is also a form of violence, because by not accepting the truth and living by that truth, we are first causing harm to our own selves, because then we end up attracting karmas accordingly. So we are violating the second law over here, that is not to lie. The third law of non-stealing. A female is only producing milk for her baby. And as nature would have it, she only produces enough for her own baby. If you heard Nirva yesterday tell us that beautiful story about that cow who gave birth to twins, and where she hid one of her calves, and she was only giving milk to her calf, and the farmer would not find any milk in her udders later on. So we know that nature produces only that much amount of milk that the baby drinks. There is no extra milk. So in order to get our supplies of the dairy products, we have to take the share of the calf, which leaves the calf hungry. And when we're leaving the calf hungry, we are violating that first law of Ahimsa again. Because remember when we said that you cannot, if you don't give the calf or the animal food and water on time, then that's violence too. And we are taking this away without the permission and without the consent of both the mother and the child. So the cow is not giving us milk voluntarily or happily. The cow is tied, or she's put in rags. Her self-esteem is destroyed, where she believes she has to give milk to us. In rural India, she's strict to give milk, because they will put a stuffed dead calf in front of her, where she thinks her baby is there while the milkman is just milking her. So we are causing violence in those ways, and we are also stealing that milk. Because according to Bhagavati Sutra, a person taking even a grain without permission is seen as an act of stealing. And therefore, when we are taking the baby's food by force from the mother without her consent and the baby's consent, it is the act of stealing. The fourth law of celibacy. Now, a mother produces milk only when she gives birth to a child, for which she has to get pregnant. And we are constantly artificially inseminating these animals, again, against their will. And this is similar to rape. And here we violate the fourth law of brahmacharya, celibacy. I have also gone to many shelter homes in India. And when I speak to the management, I always ask them towards the end that how do your cows get pregnant? And some of them admit that they give them injections. And some of them say that they have bulls. And what is the ratio of the bull to the cows? So there might be like 150, 200, 300 cows versus just a few bulls. These few bulls are responsible to make the other cows pregnant. So neither the bull nor the cows are meeting as per their will. They are forced to do this. And while we have boundaries in our lives, but we are crossing all boundaries when it comes to these animals. And therefore, again, breaking this fourth law. And remember the law which says that if you do it directly, or whether we're doing it indirectly through someone, or if we are appreciating what they're doing, and here we are consuming that product and therefore encouraging this to happen again and again. So the fourth law is also violated here. The fifth law is of non-possession and non-attachment. All of this we are only doing because of our attachment to these products, because we want to derive pleasure from our senses, especially our taste buds. We are definitely not doing this as a favor for animals, as people say that if you don't extract the milk, the cow will suffer, or the calf, if it drinks all the milk, will have some digestive issues. It's not that we care about, because if that would be the issue, we could have still just extracted the milk and not consume it. Why do we have to consume it? And it's not that the cow is going to produce extra milk throughout. It might just be for a few days. The truth is that it's because we are attached to these products and to our senses. We are using all our efforts and all our energies only to pamper our senses. So we are constantly breeding these animals and also not letting go of our attachment to this products it's a form of hoarding. And constantly breeding animals is also hoarding. So even the fifth law of non-possession and non-attachment is violated. Now, when we are violating all this, it's obviously going to attract certain karmas. Karma is the law of cause and effect because of our actions. And the first karma is the delusion karma, the Mohiniya karma, which creates confusion and fear, and it obstructs the right knowledge. I'll give you my example here. As I said, I was born in a vegetarian family, and I thought that one can't do more than being a vegetarian towards Ahimsa. So when I learned about veganism through my in-laws, I still took a long time to go vegan. The reason being, I thought again, what will happen if I give up dairy? How will my body sustain? What will happen to my calcium? And I will get deficiencies, etc. It was one was fear. Two, sometimes I would also tell myself, oh, but if I stop having dairy, what will happen to the cows? And this is something I hear, and I'm sure even you all have heard it if anyone lives in India, that what will happen to the cows? They will all go for slaughter. I hear this all the time, even right now. So my delusion causing karma, my confusion, my fear just did not let me accept the reality. And when I reflected upon this after I went vegan, I realized that one, it was also because of my attachment to my taste buds, because of which I didn't want to give up these products. I didn't want to make the effort to find out what are the other products I can have to substitute and make sure that I remain healthy. So I was constantly living in this fear and in this confusion. And while knowing the truth, one was the delusion causing karma did not let me accept the truth. Two, in spite of knowing the truth, I didn't do enough research out of inertia again to find a way out. And in the meantime, I'm still accumulating the karmas. And the delusion causing karma, which is the Mohiniya karma, is the most deadliest of the 8 karmas according to the Jain philosophy. By the way, in Jain philosophy, there are 8 karmas. And Mohiniya karma, or this delusion causing karma, is the most deadliest of them all, which is the culprit behind our constant cycle of birth and death. So by not accepting this reality today, in spite of seeing videos and in spite of seeing documentaries, in spite of reading, in spite of all this, if you're still not accepting it, it's only because of a delusion causing karma, and we are only attracting more of it. The second karma, in order to get all our dairy products, paneer and dahi and milk, etc., one mother and child has to be separated somewhere. And just like us, they're 5 sense beings. And remember, if we created that connection with them, then we realize what is it like to separate a mother and child. It's because we haven't created that connection. We are not able to realize that pain. We are not able to realize that they long to be with their children just the way we long to be with their children. So we are creating an obstruction in their bond. And by creating an obstruction in the bond, we are attracting karmas which will also create these kind of obstructions in our lives. And these obstruction creating karma, antray karma, are something that we experience every now and then. There might have been times when we want to do something, we put on all our energy into it, but we still don't get the desired result, or something happens and it just stops midways. This is because of these obstruction creating karmas that we've accumulated over time. The third one is the pain causing karma, the Vedaniya karma. In animal agriculture, the animals are suffering their entire life for a diet, fashion, and entertainment. And their suffering is not just physical. Their suffering is emotional, it's psychological, it's mental, and physical. So they are suffering throughout their life. They're constantly living in fear and in pain. And that is why we are constantly attracting those karmas in our life, or the Vedaniya karmas in our life. And if we look around us today, we can see so many diseases and people suffering from so many physical and mental diseases. There's also so many environmental effects of this, as Dr. Tushar pointed out. And lastly, our longevity karma. Every time we are using an animal product, we are indirectly responsible for its early death. So a cow otherwise lives for around 20 to 22 years if it's just left on its own to survive. But because of the dairy industry, they don't live for more than 5 to 6 years. And therefore, we are responsible. If we are having dairy products or any of the animal products, we are responsible for impacting this longevity karma of theirs. And this will affect our longevity karma either in this birth or in next birth. Yeah, and finally, I want to say that we went through the gross and the subtle violence. So in animal agriculture, as you can see, there is gross as well as subtle violence. There is the final killing, there's physical suffering, but there's also suffering happening at the subtle level of emotions, psychological. There's fear, because animals, if you see in their eyes, when they see the human coming, there's fear in their eyes. And we don't want to see that fear. Rather, we've not made that connection, and that is why we cannot see that fear. If I have to define Ahimsa again, it's a fundamental principle forming the cornerstone of ethics and doctrine of Jainism. It means non-violence, non-injury, and absence of desire to form any life forms. It is not just a theory about life, but a way of living. And the definition of vegan is philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purpose. So we can see that veganism is stressing more on gross ahimsa, while ahimsa is a more wholesome definition which speaks about violence from every point of view, like the smallest atom to something that's as large as space, so causing ultimate killing, to psychologically creating fear in animals. And also the other things, we saw the 6 forms of body. Again, we are so used to just seeing the killing of the animal, but we don't realize that the product, the way it's come, it has caused harm to every form of body while coming as a final product. So if it is dairy, it has polluted the land, it has polluted the water and overused water, as we saw in the slides of Dr. Tushar. It has, there's deforestation happening, because of which 2 and 5 sense beings are going extinct. So there's violence happening right from 1 sense being to 6 sense being. And that is what Ahimsa focuses on. It is telling us that minimize your violence to just the smallest form of life, that is 1 sense being, which is important for your survival. Anything beyond that, we don't need it in order to survive. We can do without those products. We can find healthier products, and those are easily available. Honestly, we don't even need alternatives to them. It's alternatives probably is just given so that people stay away from animal products. But honestly, we don't even need an alternative to dairy. There is enough sources, as Dr. Gina and Asha and Dr. Tushar said, where we can get our protein and calcium from, and we don't need to consume any of these animal products. And finally, something that Gandhi said, that ahimsa is, it's impossible for an imperfect man to grasp the whole of that essence. It's just too much to bear its full place. And that is why when people say that ahimsa needs to evolve and accept veganism, or veganism is the modern concept of ahimsa, I feel ahimsa by itself is wholesome. It speaks about every form of life. It's just that probably we are evolving and we are learning more about it. Because it is very difficult to practice the whole of Ahimsa in our lives. We won't be able to bear it. We won't be able to survive. But Ahimsa was perfect the way it was 2,500 years back. And it is just the way it is even today. Whether it's veganism or any other concept, Ahimsa always included that. And Jainism always included those concepts. We just have to apply it. We have to read in between the lines and apply it in our lives. We just have to hold back and question, where did this come from? Was there any violence caused while coming before it reached to me? Was there unnecessary violence caused? Is this something that I really require to survive? These are some of the questions we need to ask. We need to step out of our inertia. We need to accept self-restraint, which is our stepping stone towards Ahimsa. And this is how we can start practicing Ahimsa in a small way while staying away from gross violence. And lastly, I read this in a book called Mahavir Vani, and I just translated it in English, that till we do not focus on Ahimsa, the world will not be a beautiful place. Life will not evolve. And by life, we mean the life from the 6 forms of body, and the environment cannot be protected. And we can see that today. Thank you.
Ruchika, thank you so much for a presentation that many folks in the Q&A have been complimenting. And you seem to have also been very efficient, and you have time for Q&A. If that's okay, we can send some of the questions that have come up. So maybe one of the questions that came up in the last topic was about the misinformation about dairy. Somebody had asked if it was limited to the US, and I believe one of our Jain Vegan Initiative board members had answered. But from your perspective, are there forces in India that continue to promote misinformation about dairy products? And why are things seeming to go in both the direction of some adopting veganism and some adopting the pattern of more and more consumption?
Gina, we are just so conditioned to believe that whatever happened in history or whatever happened in the past, or what some great saints did, is the right thing, and that is what we should be doing. So we don't tend to question what is happening today. We don't want to accept that reality today. People will argue saying that, but Bhagwan Mahavir, who was the spiritual leader, consumed dairy. Now, these are stories. We don't know if those are true. But at the same time, Mahavir said, stay away from vegan. So I often think that was Mahavir confused that he would tell people, stay away from vegan, but have dairy himself? Would that be the case? Or is it our interpretation? So people are just very conditioned. They want to live by what happened in the past. So that's the reason why they don't want to challenge authority sometimes. And the fear, it's also the fear, I guess. They don't want to take this step out of fear. So that's the reason why people don't accept. But yes, there are many, many Jains who do say that this entire veganism is a conspiracy to get rid of our cattle. And if we stop having dairy, the cows will go to slaughter. As I said, I thought the same till I came to the reality that, this is not true. And actually, I went vegan because when I was feeding my daughter and some milk came on my hand and I saw that the milk of the cow and my milk looked the same, that's when I created the connection with the cow. And that's what helped me give up dairy products. So somewhere we have to create that connection. We have to accept what's reality. And sometimes we have to question that maybe it happened in the past, but it is not correct today.
Yes. And we know that you've actually had conversations with ascetics, the sadhus and sadhvis and Digambar ascetics in India, other sects as well. There was a question about how to convince our religious leaders. And we heard from one of the other speakers, I think yesterday Nirva was speaking about sadhu that she heard in India that was speaking about veganism. So there are some that are advocating for veganism. What is your experience on the ones that accept veganism has something touched their heart, or what is the way to communicate that has been most effective in promoting change among our religious leaders? Oh, and Ruchika, could you stop sharing screen? Just hit stop share.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
There we go.
So one thing is that I realized is never question the authority. So, go with respect. Ask them, this is what is happening. Do you think we should be consuming it? So now sadhus have come to a point where they do admit that, yes, the process is entirely wrong. What is happening is entirely wrong, and this is not how it should happen. They, however, still say the product is not bad, but the process is bad. We need to improve how we derive this. So there are certain sadhus who agree that veganism is the right way. Unfortunately, not many of them speak publicly because it's because of the society, because the way it's structured, that they are not able to speak openly about this. While the rest of them still think it's a conspiracy, they agree the process is bad and the process needs to change, but they are somewhere still midway. They're still not accepting the truth completely. They're not able to go vegan. And I think it's the entire structure that's over here, because of which till the highest authorities don't start speaking about it, their disciples are not able to, even if they agree to this, they are not able to practice it. And it did happen with one of the Jain sadhus who had come to meet Chittrabhanu at home, and then he went vegan. He spoke about it extensively, even in public. But finally, he had to stop speaking about it because the authorities were not accepting it. But slowly and gradually, I think as a community and as youngsters will go and talk about this and talk about the violence and just question them, how does this, align with the Jain philosophy? Somewhere they will have to come in terms. It's a matter of time, but they will have to come in terms with this.
We've definitely seen movement over the past several decades. There was a time when no one was speaking about it. A few courageous voices have been.
They wouldn't even admit that, there's something wrong with it. Today, they admit that the process is completely wrong and there is so much cruelty happening.
Yeah. But
the Jain community is very dairy heavy. I mean, and especially during Paryushan, you will see they're so dairy heavy, like everything that they make is with dairy. I hope and I urge Jains to try going vegan for 8 days. There's a vegan Paryushan cookbook. There's also another cookbook for everyday cooking called the Rainbow
Food for the Vegan Planet.
Yes, for the vegan palate.
It's wonderful. Yeah, and the difference is, of course, in Paryushan.
It's Jain and it's vegan.
Exactly. The difference is simply that the rainbow food includes fruits and vegetables, which are generally good for health. And the Paryushan cookbook is meant for a very limited time when we would exclude those items as well. But they both exclude roots and they're both vegan.
Yes. So the rainbow one is good for everyday cooking.
Exactly.
And it's simple. It's really, really simple. Indian food by itself in many ways is just naturally vegan. We just have to replace the ghee or the clarified butter with oil. Paneer is anyways not our staple diet. Honestly, it's more in the north. It came from Sindh, from Pakistan. It's just got into our diet now. And as I said, it's only because of taste more than anything.
There was a question about, can Jains keep pets?
That's a good question. It's a little tricky question, right? Because in India, I mean, otherwise the stray dogs many times are abused or they get killed. So maybe in order to save them, it's good to take a risk. It's good to have a rescued pet rather than buying a pet. Buying a pet is definitely a no-no. But otherwise, I'm not too sure if one should keep a pet. If you can feed the strays around you, if they can have their freedom, if they can have the shelter, then it's good to just, leave them. But if one wants to have a pet, then please take a rescued one or a stray dog and not buy a pet. Sure.
It seems almost like if you have a rescue animal, it's a small scale version of a sanctuary, which we Jains are very
absolutely
historically.
So you're doing it out of compassion, right? You're doing it out of compassion. The intention matters. You're doing it in order to save that animal out of compassion. Then yes, absolutely. And so there are many people who are doing that, and that's great.
I think Sunny, I'm not sure if he's able to speak. He's one of our panelists. Sunny certainly has experience with that, and perhaps others as well. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a couple of questions are going on about, somebody was also offering that there's vegan pet food for dogs who are rescues also. So you can even find the vegan pet food. And I suppose in India, they eat everything. They'll eat, there
is vegan pet food as well. Yeah. And they do. A lot of people, a lot of Jains or vegetarians who have pets at home, they're just given normal home food. I don't know whether it's healthy. I have no knowledge about what pets should be eating, but I know that they're just given normal food.
Yeah. Tell us about what you see as the vegan movement's evolution in India. You've organized Ahimsa Fest. You're in touch with many of the groups. Tell us about how you see things evolving in India. And if people are interested, some people are asking, how do I get involved? How do I bring materials to my contacts in India?
So veganism in India has grown over the last few years. 2016, when we did the first Ahimsa Fest, people didn't know what vegan was. I think late 2018 to early 2019 onwards, it literally exploded. And there is so much awareness about veganism because there are days when we go for activism. And while we're talking to people about animal cruelty, they tell us, so the best thing is to go vegan. So there was a time when we were telling people what vegan is. Now we have people telling us, when we're explaining to them about animal cruelty, saying that, okay, so the solution is to go vegan. So veganism is growing very fast in India. And the good thing about veganism is that it's not religion driven, right? It's compassion driven. So people from various religions, various backgrounds, and this is across the world, whether you're following Islam or you're following Christianity or Buddhism, Jainism, or, any part of India, people are just joining in this movement. And they're actively promoting, that's one thing about vegans, right? Then they can't hold it to themselves. They definitely want to actively promote that. These people are actively promoting, going out, doing activism every week to different places. So there's a lot of awareness. A lot of restaurants have started giving separate vegan menus, have vegan options. There are many, many vegan products. The good thing in India is that people can start homegrown businesses. There are many homegrown businesses here. The large industries now getting into vegan options. So there are certain meat companies, meat processing companies, which have also started making mock meats because they do see a future in there. So there is a huge change in, people's thinking.
There's a couple of questions.
Game changers, Nirva, if you're there, game changers played a huge impact on people. And I think it was during COVID or something, and a lot of people then tried going vegan after seeing that movie.
Yeah,
so that movie brought a lot of change.
Ruchika, when you said 2018, 19, I kind of was hoping that the Game Changers was part of that revolution. So I'm so glad.
It definitely was. It definitely was. I have friends who told me that, we watched Game Changers and then we tried being vegan for some time. They, of course, went back. There are many people who continue being, but that was a huge, it brought a huge mind shift.
Right.
Thank you for that.
It's amazing how much some of the global media has an effect around the world, right? Like I don't know if people would have been able to predict that something like the Game Changers would create such an awareness in India.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah. I think because it was based on the principle of empowerment, right? And it wasn't judgmental, and they didn't talk about the cruelty behind the vegan movement. They focused on results. And it
Right.
was just so empowering to watch. Like, you just wanted to be there. And I think we all have that. It also focused on an older population of athletes that wanted to get back into things or maintain that level of prominence. So it was hopeful, like very hopeful. And then at the end, they had a bit about the cruelty aspect when they had a little blurb from Damien Monder, who's the CEO of the Internationally Anti-Poaching Foundation. And he talked about how he saves all these big rhinos and elephants and animals in Africa, but then he's eating meat. And he said that just doesn't make any sense. And so they tied in all of that as well, but they didn't make it the foundational principle.
Right. It was very positive, right? It didn't make people go on a guilt trip. It didn't make them feel guilty. It was a very, very positive documentary. And that's why I think that positiveness is what makes a huge impact. Like, even when you speak to people, if you make them feel guilty, the first thing is self-defense, right? They want to defend themselves. But if you bring out the positive aspects of this, people want to hear more.